Hello, and welcome to the Ball and All a podcast. My name is Mpho, and I am the host and producer and creator of the Ball and All podcast, which is a podcast where I talk all things basketball and and everything else that comes around it. We've spoken about the Basketball Africa League. We've spoken about the NBA season last season's NBA season that's ended. We touched on a bit of the WNBA in and around the NBA talk. And then now, obviously, we've gone through the Olympics and I took a bit of a break in that period. Now we're back with the second half of the WNBA, and that is what I'm going to be talking about. All things WNBA. We're in the second half of the season. All the teams are racing their way to the 32-game mark, where they will then figure out whether they are going to make it and play in the playoffs, or they're going to go home a little bit early. And so we're in that part. The interesting thing about it was that because we had an Olympic break, some teams obviously got some of their injured players back, i.e. the Sparks getting Nneka Ogwumike, the Mystics getting Elena Delle Donne back in. She hasn't played since her MVP season. She had a multiple back injury. She played a second game of 2 last night, scored about 17 points in that first game. And then in the second game, she scored about 11 points, but then didn't play that many minutes in that game for the Washington Mystics. But yeah, so we're back in. Teams are setting themselves up. The first thing that I want to just have a look at, and then we can discuss as we go along, is the standings, and then I'll just give you a rundown of what it looks like for now. As you can see, the Sun, the Aces, and the Storm have qualified for the playoffs. They are above pretty much. They're close to 700 percentage of their games won, followed by the Lynx, the Minnesota Lynx, the Phoenix Mercury, the Chicago Sky at 500. It's interesting to see that half of the teams are 500 and above and half are 500 and below. From a percentage perspective, you've got the Wings, the Liberty, the Sparks, as well as the Mystics, who are playing for those final 2 playoff spots. You can assume that the Chicago Sky, being 1.5 games away from the Wings and essentially 3 games away from the Mystics, they probably have booked their spot into the playoffs along with the 2 teams above them. However, there are 8 teams that go to the WNBA playoffs, so position 7 and 8 are going to be hotly contested with teams going towards the back end. You can see obviously the Dream and the Fever. The Dream started the season well. They're now at the bottom. The Mystics having some interesting issues. Obviously, Emma Messerman deciding not to come back. She didn't play the first half of the season, but did play for Belgium at the Olympic Games. But she's decided not to play in this in the back end of the WNBA. She's chosen to take a break. Remember, she had a full European season before coming to so it's going to be quite interesting to see how Elena Delle Donne, Maisha Hines-Allen kind of work around that to try and get themselves up. The Sparks, one of the best defensive teams, top 5 defensive team in the league. Only problem is that they can't score. They're struggling on the offense. Nneka Ogwumike is now finally back. Shanae is back there at full fitness. Can they make a run? That's going to be quite interesting to see. So too the Liberty. The Liberty need to make a run to kind of stave off the chasing pack of the Sparks and the Mystics. The Wings themselves trying to get themselves back up there. They've had a lot of injuries. Satu Sabali's out. Chelsea Dungy and Charlie Collier also unavailable. So they're just also trying to figure their way out here. The Chicago Sky also quite fully fit, and you can see Ali Quigley had an incredible game in the last one where she was just shooting threes from everywhere. So this is where the standings are. This is what the WNBA looks like for now. This past week we had the players of the week, Brittany Griner. She scored 26 points against New York Liberty the night before, but she's averaged 20 points per game, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists. Jonquel Jones of the Connecticut Sun, who has been such a strong defensive presence for them, very strong also offensively for them. She averaged 18.7 points per game, 14.7 rebounds, and 3.5 assists as well. So it's quite important and quite very good for them. For Jonquel Jones and the Connecticut Sun, who are fighting the Aces for 1 and 2 in the league. Remember, number 1 and number 2 automatically get a bye in the first round of the playoffs, and then 3 will play 8, 4 will play 7, 5 will play 6 for to qualify for the next. So the top 3, it's not over. There's still a lot to play for in that. And so that's going to be quite interesting to see. But what I wanted to chat about today was the playoff push for these teams. Remember, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can like the video if you like it, subscribe and click the notification bell to be notified when we go live the next time. You can also follow and subscribe to follow me on Twitter at Mpho. So now let's look at the playoff push. What I've done is that teams have about 9 games left right now in the WNBA. Well, there's one team that has 9, there's one team that has 6, but everyone's hanging around 6 and 7 games. So just wanted to look and give you like a strength of schedule so you can then understand what the permutations are and where they will be going forward. So let me just put up the remaining fixtures. If you look at the remaining fixtures, you can see what I've done here is that the teams that are in green are the teams that are below 500, and that gives you a higher probability of winning. Each team, a higher probability of winning. The team that's on 500, that's in gold, that's Chicago. They're at 500. You can just figure out where you wanna put them. And then the teams that are in red are the teams that are above 500. The teams in green are the teams below 500. So you have a high probability of winning against them. And the teams that are above 500 and also the ones in orange are the teams that you have a lower probability of winning them. So you can kind of see which teams have harder fixtures going forward. Just want to bring your attention to that Dallas Wings, New York Liberty, LA Sparks, and the Mystics. If you look at how they are looking, they're the 4 teams who are probably going to be fighting it out for those final 2 spots in the playoffs. The Wings are half a game above the Liberty. The Liberty are half a game above the Sparks, and the Sparks are half a game above the Mystics. So you lose a game, you could find yourself in the playoff spots. Win a game, you could also find yourself pulling away or jumping some other teams. If you look at the Wings have the next 3 fixtures for the Wings are very winnable. Then they've got Connecticut, the Sun at home, and then they play the Liberty again, and they finish off with the Sparks, which that's going to be quite an interesting game because it might just be a play-in-esque final game for the 2 teams, depending on how it goes. But the Wings have the best strength of schedule of those 4 teams. They only play 2 teams that are above 500, and the rest are below 500. Washington, Atlanta twice, the Liberty and the Sparks. So that's quite interesting because that kind of says that they are the front runners of getting that number 7 spot. The next one, or even pushing up even further, because if you look at the Sky have 5 games with teams above 500, and then they finish off with teams below 300. So if they go 5-2, they could find themselves a little bit if they go 3-5, 3 wins and 5 losses, they could find themselves be caught up by the Wings a little bit. But we're not talking about the Sky because I think the Sky are through. But if you look at the Liberty have 4 teams, play 4 games with teams above 500. And they have 2 below 500. One of those is against Dallas. So that's going to be quite interesting to see how they navigate this portion of the season, because they're pretty much trying to push off the Sparks and the Mystics. The Sparks, who claim that they're fully fit, they look fully fit. They only lost to Connecticut last night by 4 points. They struggled to contain Jonquel Jones, and Brianna Jones, and De'Anna Bonner. But the Sparks are a top 5 defense, so their only problem is scoring points. And if Neck is going to get back to full fitness and get there, she gives them a chance against these teams above 500. They've got 4 teams above 500, but 3 teams below 500. So there is a possibility for them to sway some games. I look at that Minnesota game and the Connecticut game at home. If it's a versus, it means it's at home. If it's an at, it means it's away. So if you look at that Minnesota-Connecticut situation, that could swing in their way after Indiana, and you can have like a 3-game win streak. The Sparks are coming off of they won 4 of the last 5, and they obviously lost to Connecticut last night, so they've won 4 of the last 6. So there you can see that they are trending in the right direction in this league. The Mystics, on the other hand, they are an interesting team. Obviously, they need to get Elena Delle Donne in. If they can sneak their way into the playoffs, that'll be very good. They also have I think they have the 3rd best strength of schedule amongst those 4, with obviously 3 teams above 500, 4 teams above 500. But the thing for them is that they've also got 4 teams 500 and below, so they can come out of this thing 4-4 with a 500 record. That kind of gives them an opportunity. They can also swing some of those games, like with that final game with Minnesota. If Minnesota have already qualified for the playoffs, they probably might want to rest some players. So Washington does have a chance, especially if Elena Delle Donne is fully fit, to help Maisha Hines-Allen to kind of push. Obviously, the question with the Washington is, after Maisha Hines-Allen and then Elena Delle Donne, they don't have any much. Obviously, Emma Messerman is missing, so that's something that they're going to have to try and sort out as they go on. They just don't have that many games, and so that's a tough one. There's a player, Erica Plessons, who was shooting quite well from 3 yesterday for the Mystics, but we're not too sure. But obviously, if you look at that, you kind of can give yourselves away. Indiana Fever just got some tough games coming up. Obviously, their playoff odds are pretty much out. The Atlanta Dream hurt their playoff odds by going on a 0-10 run. They've lost their last 10 games. It's just not great. It isn't looking good for a team that started quite well. There was some team issues, some infighting there for the Atlanta Dream, a team with obviously new ownership this season. So that's also kind of something that needs to look at. But if you look at the WNBA, honestly, if you look at the top part, some of the best teams of the net ratings are the Aces, the Sun, Seattle. They're up there. But an interesting one is the fact that Dallas is a positive plus rating. There's 7 teams with a positive net rating, and Dallas is one of them. Shows you that they could be a tricky customer going forward, and they could win some of those games that were red here. Positive because obviously you've got the likes of Erika Ogunbowale, who's having an MVP-esque season as a guard. So that's going to be quite cool to watch. And so those are the type of things that we were looking out for in the WNBA coming through this week. Sylvia Fowles of Minnesota scored a 20-point double-double the other night, which was really good. And then obviously for the Aces, Bill Laimbeer, the coach, won his 300th game in the WNBA. Remember, he started with the Liberty. He's at the Aces. So everyone's setting themselves up and setting up their store for that final playoff push next week. Just to have a look at next week's games, some things that I'll be looking out for. That Phoenix Mercury New York Liberty game will give you an inkling as to where the Liberty are. When they played them the last 2 nights ago, the Phoenix Mercury had a 17-0 run towards the end of that game to pretty much close them out. You had Brittany Griner, Skylar Diggins-Smith, and Diana Taurasi all having 20-point games. Outside of Betnijah Delaney, there isn't much coming from offensive production coming out of the Liberty. Sabrina Ionescu's not having one of the better seasons here, but it's going to be quite interesting to see if they can pull one back from in that baseball style series. The Chicago Sky have some really great games, baseball style series as well. They start off their West Coast tour to Seattle. They play them twice, and then they play the Aces. They play the Mercury, then they go and play the Aces in Las Vegas before they finish off with a 4-game homestand. That's going to be quite interesting to see if they lose these games, because they're playing teams above them in the standings. If they lose these games, they will drop into that playoff bracket there for 6 and 7. The Sparks play the Sun again. I don't think the Sparks will win this time. I think the Sun are a very good team. But that Dallas-Washington Mystics game on Saturday is going to be key for this playoff push. If Dallas wins, they push themselves away and pretty much kind of solidify themselves between them and the Mystics and effectively make it like a 3-team tournament. However, the Mystics win, they bring themselves closer and give themselves a boost going into the final 2 weeks of the season. Then they go on to play the Connecticut Sun, do the Mystics, which would be quite interesting to see how they come up against a very good front court of Brianna Jones, Jonquel Jones, and Deanna Bonner against obviously Elena Delle Donne and Maisha Hines-Allen. So that's going to be quite interesting to see. And it will test the Mystics' front court defense and interior defense a lot, because the Sun are very good inside the paint. You also have the Sparks playing the Lynx. I think that's a very nice nice matchup for the Sparks, of something that they can bring in, because from a defensive point of view, Minnesota are sixth, and the Sparks are slightly 1 point better. But from an offensive point of view, there is a massive gap. But with Nika back into this lineup, it could give them something. The bench scoring for the Sparks team is also something that they need to try and figure out. Derek Fisher needs to figure out. Because Nia Coffey did quite well the other day, but nobody else kind of helped them, and nobody else also gave production from the starters outside of Neka. And then obviously, I think the last game, I think to watch out for, because I'm a big 3-point fan, and I think the Aces are a really good team. The Aces are the number 1 offensive team and the number 2 defensive team. So that's going to be quite interesting to see how they come up against the Chicago Sky. Obviously, Ali Quigley and Courtney Vandersloot are there, as well as Candace Parker. They've sort of gotten themselves into a bit of a groove. They're also, if you look here, obviously they've only got 1 game win streak, but they won 4 before they lost the other night. So they are kind of also pushing their way back into contention, are the Sky. So that's going to be quite interesting to watch. But those are the fixtures of next week. Enjoy the WNBA. I'll be back in the following week, again on Friday, to give you a recap of what's going on and update the fixtures table to give you a sense of what's happening on the court. But do enjoy Brittany Griner's having an incredible period of basketball, Olympic gold medalist, enjoying this first week back from the Olympics. She's just dominating teams and giving the Phoenix Mercury some sort of a push into those top 3 spots, because that's also something that you need to watch out for. But from myself, Mpho, on the Ball on All podcast, remember, do like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter where this is posted, as well as put in the notification bell and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And we'll be back again for another installment of the Ball and All podcast, where we discuss the WNBA in more depth as we go to the end of the season. There's no NBA basketball. There's no Basketball Africa League. There is Afro Basket going on, so I'll give you a little bit of a taste of what's happening next week. I know Angola lost 2 games, so it's going to be quite interesting to see how Angola navigate this tournament. But outside of that, have a good afternoon, have a good day, good night. Enjoy the fixtures, the WNBA, and for myself, Mpho Mutlani, le sale kakagiso.